Yes, welcome back, Loony listeners. This is episode 73 of Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. This is a very different episode tonight. We'll be paying tribute to Stan Lee, who unfortunately passed away this week. So there's been an influx of, I guess, of reflections and thoughts on Stan the man and what he's done for Marvel and for comic readers in general. So we just thought it would be really nice to share our thoughts, like from the Loonies to the hosts themselves, just to share our thoughts on Stan, because it's such a huge, I guess it's such a huge thing that's happened in the comic book industry. I am one of your hosts, High Priest of Khonshu, Ray, and Khonshu, unfortunately, is still not with us. I believe I think he was made a Herald of Galactus, and he's stolen a purple baby, so he's riding around the cosmos somewhere. Hopefully Connor can make his way back soon. But with me is fellow High Priest Rebecca. Rebecca, welcome.
Hi.
How are you? How are things?
Well, I'm in the middle of a fairly chaotic time, but things are generally, personally, on an even keel. Oh,
okay, that's good. Better than terrible.
Yeah.
And we have with us a special guest, Loony, none other than the power of Chad. Chad, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
Loonies, it must be known that Chad is awake in the wee hours of the morning, but he has been so gracious with his time, and it's great to have you with us, Chad, to talk about Stan Lee. So, I mean, where do we start? I guess on the 12th of December, we all learnt that... November, sorry. Oh, gosh. We all learnt that Stan Lee passed away, unfortunately. And yeah, I just wanted to grab both of your thoughts as you received the news on that day. How was it for you? Did you... Yeah, Rebecca, were you obviously shocked, I guess?
Well, look, he's 95 years old. Mm-hmm. There's shocked and there's shocked.
Yeah.
It was a weird time for me because I work stupid hours, so no one worked this out in your head. But I'd just gone to bed. Mm-hmm. And I'd just gone to bed and I'd kind of settled down. You know, like you just unwind, or I just check Twitter and check this. Mm-hmm. And it sort of came up and I was like, oh, my first thought was pretty much, oh God, no. Right, yes. I just can't deal with this right now. It's like we've got Brexit going on. We've got, it's just like, it's too much to deal with. And then I proceeded to spend all the time that I should have been asleep, so a good 2 to 3 hours, just reading other people's reactions and reading eulogies and tributes, and not getting as emotional as I was the next morning when I was like properly awake, but just feeling a little bit numb, and that everyone was saying it better than I ever could. And I tried to find that perfect, like, summary of how I felt about it, but I really just felt that kind of, just a real mix of emotions.
Yeah. Did you, at any point, because I saw it online as well, just in forums and on Twitter and stuff, were there ever any thoughts that it was a hoax? Or had there been stuff...
The first time I saw it reported was from someone I trust quite well, who used to write for Comics Alliance, and just said very plainly, I'm hearing reports that Stan Lee's died. So then the next half hour was spent looking for an actual, is this true? Because he didn't do it with any links to anything, he didn't do it with any, oh my God, RIP. It was a very plain, I'm hearing these reports coming in, then... very shortly afterwards, like 10 minutes afterwards, were the first ones that were pretty apparent. There was a few comic people going, I hope it's not true. Then came the actual sort of confirmation. And No, I never really thought it was I never thought it was a hoax because it didn't seem to be coming from anywhere that... It was just so low-key, that first way I read it, that it was just... I didn't really think, oh my God, I wonder if it's true or not, but I did want to, before I said anything, wanted to go make sure it was true. Yeah,
and I guess it's testament to, I guess, the importance and the impact Stan Lee has had on fans that, as you mentioned, Rebecca, he was 95 years old, that people were still kind of in disbelief when they heard the news because... as you say, I mean, obviously he is quite advanced. He was quite advanced in age as well, but it's just something that you don't want to kind of.
No, I mean, and you get it with. I mean, plenty of famous people die who are of an age where it's not unexpected. Or they've been ill and it's not unexpected. It still doesn't mean you don't feel a sense of disbelief.
No.
Because you don't want it to be true. You're exactly right. But
exactly.
Yeah. That's all I mean is there's a level of shock. Like if it had been someone who was 20 or 25, my shock would have been much higher.
Oh, well, I remember when I exactly remember what I was doing. I was in the office just working on a particular project, and I remember when I heard Heath Ledger passed away.
Yeah.
And that was quite shocking to me. I mean, not that I'm a huge fan, but you know, him being an Australian actor and it being known that he was going to be the Joker and all that, it did come as quite a shock. Chad, yourself, like, I'm not sure with time zones as when Stan passed away, but did you receive the news while you were awake? And how did you come about it?
Well, I work the night shift. I've stayed a few times, but all of a sudden, it's like I'm trying to get to sleep. My wife sends me a text, it's like, Stan's passed away, and, at first it's like, I've seen the clickbait articles, I've heard the hoaxes, just, this again.
Yeah. Oh, and okay, so you thought it was perhaps a hoax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I was going everywhere, checking different sites out, and there was no one speaking out against it. I think that was, like, the part where it started to actually sink in that this was actually happening.
Yeah. It was,
So it just turned into kind of like a surreal, like almost dream, because then I had to go to sleep. After hearing this. And it's just, okay.
Yeah. That would have been a very strange kind of way to have to digest that information. Especially being a huge comic fan, as we know you are, Chad, as well. Over here, it was a bit strange because, woke up to it. So obviously it broke overnight, and I was just checking my usual, Facebook, Twitter accounts and stuff, and I think I first saw it on the Defenders TV podcast post. Just that there was that Hollywood article. I think that I don't know, maybe one of the first articles that came out. And it was a bit of a shock, exactly as you said, Rebecca. Obviously he's well advanced. There were concerns of his health. Recently he was going through that god-awful legal, battle and all that. I mean, not to say that that's one's related to the other, but things weren't looking good for him. And it was just a shock because I guess. He, out of all the comic book industries, I mean, all the comic book publications and publishers, he's the most well recognised as a public image and a public figure. I think it would be fair to say that Stan Lee is quite well known. I mean, the movies have helped, haven't they? Like with all his cameos, and he's so ingrained in pop culture now, I think, as well. I mean, even people who don't collect comics, I think would know of Stan Lee. Well, I know Eve, my partner. She knows of him, and she has no inclination towards any comics or any comic book movies. So he's really he really made a stand for himself. I believe in his public persona, and I guess that's something we can talk about as well. I mean, there were also talks about one of the things I guess that really I have a little gripe with was that, obviously this terrible sad news that Stan Lee has passed away, and then there's that mourning process, and then immediately, well, not immediately, but a short time after, you get some people kind of, it's tall poppy syndrome in Australia. I don't know, is that the same in England and the US, that term?
I don't know.
No?
Probably.
Okay, tall poppies are basically just cutting down someone because they're famous or they've achieved a lot, and it just seems to be a bit of a bit of a trend. And anyway, yeah, so a bit of a gripe with some people immediately going, oh, well, you do realise, what he's done. He was a very shrewd businessman. He, there's the big creative issue about, how much did he create, the likes of the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, collaborating with Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and all that. It's... I don't know, but I think his public image, one of the good things that Stan has done, or had done, was he actually pushed that image for comics, and he used his face for it, and he kind of promoted comics, even through the tough years of like the early 2000s, I guess, and I think that's one of the great things that he has done for the industry. I mean, what's your take on, I guess, this thing with him creating Spider-Man, say, and Doctor Strange and Daredevil, and that whole discussion about, he's not the sole creator. He certainly did announce it back in the day that he did create all of them.
Well, he certainly isn't the sole creator of any of those things, and a lot of that was down to the Marvel method, which was, for anyone who doesn't know, is that someone would do an outline of what the plot was, the artist would draw it all, and then people would come in and add the words. And which leaves a lot of power leaves a lot of the storytelling down to the artist, and then which is kind of flipped now a little bit, and now it's a lot more collaborative and there's a lot more, but we'll never really know. There's lots of court cases about it with Ditko and Kirby estates, and I don't know. I agree with you. I didn't want to read any of it in the first few hours. Let's put it that way. But I also knew it was coming. Is that that you're going to get everyone? I mean, you're going to get all the news people saying he created these people. And honestly, I didn't want to get into any of the sort of the really deep stuff about it. But it wouldn't have been hard for many of them to say co-created, and then you can debate whether he had any say in it at all. But the thing about Stan, I mean, there's a very good article about it that's come up this morning yesterday, I guess, on Esquire, which I can send you a link to put in show notes, which kind of explains the whole timeline, the actual court cases. It takes a very sort of neutral approach to it. But it's I think what everyone can agree, though, is he was an amazing champion for comics. He certainly had a massive impact on comics. They would not have been the same if it hadn't been for him, regardless of the creations. Regardless of some of those sort of the legalese, the compensation, whether he screwed people out, whether he did it intentionally or if he was just that kind of guy who just talked himself up a lot. I mean, we all know people who take credit for things at work. It's not necessarily malicious, but maybe it is. No. But it's kind of irrelevant because he's brought comics to he pushed comics so hard. He loved them so hard. He was in them from the very beginning of the American comics, kind of that whole thing. He had amazing experience of it, and I don't think anybody doubts that he was one of the most talented editors, and his ability to spot talent. And if you read any of the sort of tributes from comic creators, current comic creators, they were all stories about Stan being lovely to them. And not just polite lovely, but just sort of saying, that was great work, or here's a letter that said, tell the artist I thought it was the best thing he's done. Was the guy who did Death's Head. Apparently he read Death. There's a really nice letter that he posted that Stan said, I love Death's Head. I think it could be the next big thing. Tell them you did a wonderful job. Make sure your art team get congratulated as well. So, I mean, it's just he certainly wanted to sort of you know, whatever happened in those days that we're never going to be sure about, because Ditko and Kirby were quite. I mean, Ditko certainly was he only made comments about it a few times. But yeah, I mean, and his personality, and then once you get to the films and his cameos and the cartoons and this whole Stan Lee Presents, it just became synonymous with Marvel.
Yeah, and I think what you say as well, Rebecca, just further with that, I think people draw their own conclusions with this whole creative thing as well, and exactly like you say, we don't know the details, you know. First and foremost, and a lot of, if not most or all of comic book collectors and fans know, I believe they know the ins and outs of Stan Lee, Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, and how there was a collaboration and everything like that. So, you know, although it was announced, you know, back in the day when Stan went for the grab, I mean, and let's face it, not that I want to endorse or back that type of shrewd behavior, but you know, it is business, right? And it's anyone in that position, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know. I think it's not out of the ordinary that something like that happened, but I think in any case, we as fans know at least the fact that, okay, he didn't solely create them and there was a collaboration, and so we do pay the dues to Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, and we've got Loony Mail here, which we'll read out as well, and most of them make reference to Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby as well, so we all are aware of it. But yeah, exactly. I think his legacy is far more reaching than just this creative side. What he's done for comics and for Marvel is beyond just, you know, creating the characters. That's just one component. Chad, just for you, I guess, Stan as a public figure, Stan creating and collaborating with Jack Kirby. What are your thoughts on I guess how he's perceived? And his impact in society as a whole?
Well, I honestly believe that, you know, he put himself out there, like you guys have been going on about. It's like he put himself into view for people to essentially use as a caricature of himself as the businessman. People, you know, shot arrows at him, and all that jazz, just slings and arrows all day long, but he also did so much to essentially create a safe zone, like, for other people to come in underneath him. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, in certain scenarios it seems like he's definitely taking advantage of that. But at the same time, we also have to examine, well, was it him actually making those moves to, you know, essentially hijack that material? Or was it someone else and then kind of just branded it over? Like, was it a different editor that threw in his name because, hey, that's just what people do in the business? Or, you know, was it him actually being malicious? And it's hard to say. You know, most of the people involved aren't going to say anything at this point. Yeah. And also, it's like, when it comes down to it, like, in the public eye, he's always tried to be a good person. Regardless of, you know, legal battles and whatnot. He's always tried to instill good morality, the basis for it. And it's hard to say whether or not that's just a face in itself or not, but that's his character.
Yeah, it's still, I think the importance is the messages, as you say, that he conveys across, and regardless of if it's a public persona or not, the fact is that he's carrying himself in front of the public in such a way, I think is an admirable thing, you know. Him, again, talking about, you know, you've probably seen footage and heard him talk about, obviously, the parallels of Spider-Man and how, you know, teenagers can relate to that, or the X-Men being, you know, there's nothing wrong with being different, all those sorts of things. I mean, Stan did endorse it, and if you can't take that kind of stuff away, and if you offset that against this speculation as to what he did, behind the curtain, in the business. I'd tend to look at the stuff that we do know, and we do know on face value, rather than stuff that we just kind of speculate on, didn't he do it, and giving him the benefit of the doubt. But as I said, it's like business, and the thing with Stan as well. I mean, the big thing with, okay, so I'll just plug it now as well. I've been listening to, there's a really good podcast called Business Wars. I don't know if any loonies out there listen to it. Really informative. It actually pits two big companies against each other, and it actually chronicles historically what's happened. So, Adidas and Nike, stuff like that. Blockbuster and, Video Easy or something. But it also has Marvel and DC, the wars. And there's there's about 7 or 8 parts to it. And it actually chronicles the rise of Marvel throughout the age. And it's a really good reference if you want to just hear about, some of the things that, say, Stan and Jack Kirby got up to back in the day. It's a very interesting thing. And one of the takeaways from that, and again, it's something that I really like to pay tribute to Stan, was how he kind of, from a small company, I think it was Atlas Comics, or known before it became Marvel, it competed up against this huge Goliath of DC Comics. You had Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all that. And Stan actually turned the industry on its head by introducing characters that, as we mentioned before, you can easily relate to, the common person. So you have, again, as I said, Spider-Man. You have the Fantastic Four, which was very family-oriented, and it had this dynamic with family drama. You no longer had heroes which were kind of put on a pedestal, or were kind of on a different level, like highly powered aliens or what have you. You actually had relatable characters. Like Daredevil as well is actually really good as well, a good example of how someone with a disability, can rise up above that as well. So Marvel became really, really popular by actually making it really relatable to readers. And where I'm going with this, obviously, is that Stan also created Stan's Soapbox, which was a regular... I like to think of it as before the internet and stuff. It was how he kind of tweeted, or how he kind of interacted with fans on a direct level. And anyway, a lot of people recall fondly Stan's Soapbox and reading that as well, because it was something that actually brought you closer to the comics. And I believe, as Stan said, he kind of wanted to make it. He wanted to bridge that divide between comics being this separate thing and you, the reader, and he wanted to make you feel comfortable, like you were kind of talking to a friend. And again, I think that's just it just encapsulates what Stan has done for comics by making it all that more relatable for readers alike. Did any of you read the Stan Soapbox back in the day, by any chance?
Well, I would have read I read all the letters pages religiously on every comic I ever read. So, depending on, I have no idea who was replying to them, because I was a kid and I was just reading, and to me it was just Marvel replying, whoever was replying.
Oh yeah, like the editor, could have, like Stan as well.
Yeah.
Chad, were you aware of the bullpen? Or I mean, there became later iterations like the bullpen. But Stan's Soapbox was what kicked it off. Did you had you come across that?
I only started reading them retroactively when I got to adulthood and wanted to actually cross-reference what was going on, personalities in comics. It's just you hear about different articles to the editor, and you just kind of like fly with it. It's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
that's you when you're a kid. All of a sudden you want to know who's talking. and you can kind of get into their shoes and understand what they're trying to get at with the comic. So it only started being a thing to me, once I got out of the house and was actually on my own to actually read these things.
Yeah, it's I think it's one of the really innovative things that Marvel had done, and it was an innovation through Stan as well. And I also want to point out as well this innovation that Marvel did. Listening to the business wars with Marvel versus DC, again, history tells us that, okay, so DC was this huge giant, right, and Marvel were making inroads. They weren't selling as many comics as DC, because DC had a slew of titles, right? But Marvel were, I guess, per capita were rising quite fast, and DC actually ended up first. They actually stole. Well, they stole ideas from Marvel. Like they literally went. They instantly got together, tried to figure out what Marvel was doing that actually had them selling all these books. So stuff like apparently word balloons on the covers of the lot of the Marvel books. DC actually thought that was one of the reasons. So there was a time where you actually see DC putting a lot of word balloons on their covers because Marvel had done it. But what is really funny was that Marvel stopped that immediately, even to the point of the palette of colors on the cover and within the comic. DC scrutinized that from Marvel and they copied it as well. But Stan played this game with them, and he actually changed everything. Every time DC tried to copy Marvel, Stan would do something different. And for some reason, Marvel was still gaining tracks with Stan, keeping things different, keeping things lively, and Stan himself as well. Again, this is paraphrased from the Business Wars thing. He did say that he found it quite flattering, and he found it almost as a bit of a cheeky game how he would actually keep an eye on what DC were doing, and if there were anything there that they had obviously copied from Marvel, he would chop and change things straight away. This culminated in 1970 with DC actually having a bit of a coup, and they actually steal Jack Kirby from Marvel, which was a big thing. Because I don't know about you, when I grew up, and I wanted to ask this straight off the bat, and I'll probably ask it now, but introductions to Stan. When I grew up, following the Incredible Hulk, Spider-Man, in the cartoons, in the movies, even like my sisters and I had, costumes and stuff that my parents bought of it. All that stuff. I always associated Marvel with Lee and Kirby. Like for me, that was like, Sonny and Cher or something like that. They were a real couple for me in Marvel, and I didn't realize that Kirby actually went to DC. So that was a big coup. Kirby was the boss of Stan apparently at one point, and then Stan got promoted. He then gave Kirby a role, but apparently I think paid him not as much as he probably had before. There was a little resentment between the two. This is all, again, speculated on in that podcast. It culminated in Jack Kirby leaving. But they did really collaborate and make some totally memorable characters. But anyway, Rebecca, first introductions, first thoughts on Stan Lee when you grew up? Like, how did you know about him? Like, obviously you knew Marvel, but how did you come to know Stan?
Well, the first comics I read was Spider-Man and X-Men, the original X-Men. Because I'm old. I started reading comics in the early 70s. Well, mid-70s, let's say. I was born in 1970, so mid-70s. I don't honestly know when I first went from these are cool stories to noticing who'd written them, or who'd drawn them, or anything about them, or who wrote the letters page. I just read them, so I just, and eventually, I think it just sort of like both then, all the names just like bled into my subconscious.
Yeah,
I
okay.
just all of a sudden knew who Stan Lee was and who Steve Ditko was and who Jack Kirby was.
Mm-hmm.
And we there's 3 of us in my family, 3 sisters, and we used to get comics instead of pocket money. So and England got there's lots of stories about how we got our comics. We got them in totally out of order. Whatever they had, they were all just shoved in digests, and we'd go in and pick. And like the Marvel ones always had more colourful covers, because on the DC side, the choices were really... I think it was almost always Batman.
Mm-hmm.
So, which we'd occasionally buy, don't get me wrong. So the Marvel choices were always Spider-Man, X-Men, the Avengers, and sometimes Captain America. Mm-hmm. And it was always like, I'm not going to be Captain America. So and Avengers we were very in and out of, so that's why it was sometimes Batman. So every single week, every single week instead of pocket money, we'd have 3 comics between us, and it would revolve around. And so obviously I started at the right age when he was involved with them, and we were getting them from all eras, and they were my 2 favourites, were Spider-Man and X-Men. So, there was a lot of Lee's influence in there.
Okay. And Chad, did you how did you come across Stan Lee as being the face of Marvel as opposed to just discovering Marvel?
Well, it started with watching Boomerang, which is like a network of old classic cartoons, and it's like an offshoot of Cartoon Network. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started watching the old school Spider-Man cartoons.
Is that where Stan Lee voiced Spider-Man as well?
Did he?
No, he did the intros, didn't he?
Oh, did he do the intros? Okay.
I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. But it's like, wow, that's not a Stan Lee voice at all.
No, he's got a very recognisable voice, doesn't he?
He did the intros to something, not that I didn't watch it, so...
Yeah.
And then, like, after that, I started watching the, newer, early 90s Spider-Man cartoon. Uh-huh. And that's, where a lot of the comic books started actually, coming to fruition. It's, all these side characters actually would make appearances, not just, kind of shrug off a lot of the rest of the comic lore, essentially.
Yeah.
But, and then from there, it just turned into, 90s X-Men cartoon and all the rest of them that came through. And, it was just, he'd make various, appearances.
Well, I'm not sure.
Just...
Sorry, Chad. I'm not sure if he did have a hand in it, but I did some reading about Stan Lee's timeline, and in 1991 he was appointed from Marvel, to take care of a lot of the TV and the movie component of Marvel. So I wonder if he did have a hand in the X-Men, because that X-Men cartoon of the 90s was phenomenal, wasn't it? I mean, it's a lot of people had a lot of fond memories of that show.
Oh yeah, it was very innovative. There was nothing else like it, really. Like that heavy metal riff intro was just it was crazy. There was nothing else like it. Yeah. And there was always a character that you could relate to. Like that's like you guys were saying, it's what they bank on is that whatever was going on, there was something that you could attach yourself to.
Yeah.
You can see yourself in Wolverine's temper, or, Nightcrawler's evasiveness, or Kitty Pryde's, her ability to just not have to deal with something. She could just get out of it.
Yeah, it was very smart. And actually, just on that as well, I had a look on, and I know, Rebecca, you had a look at the list of all the creations associated with Stan Lee. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of them.
There are a ridiculous number. Even if you just take Spider-Man's villains.
Yeah.
I mean, and they're big.
They're big hitting characters as well. Like, I mean, characters that we see on TV today, like just off the top of my head, you have Karen Page, Foggy Nelson as well.
You've got the whole. We haven't really mentioned Iron Man, so there's the whole Iron Man, Happy Hogan, Pepper,
yeah, exactly.
All
those peripheral characters, but all the big ones as well. And again, of course, he collaborated with the likes of Kirby, Bill Everett for Daredevil, and Steve Ditko for the big for Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. But I was just looking through it, like Juggernaut, like it's an awesome character.
And while a lot of people like flagging up Captain America in there, he obviously didn't create Captain America, but he did. No. He did create the Avengers, co-create.
He did, yeah.
So there was a huge hand in it there. So I mean, like, no one should be made to feel bad for like picking Captain America in there. It's still a big
point. Yeah, true. And look, if anything, a little tidbit again, I'm just referencing some of the notes here. Stan Lee's connection with Captain America in Timely Comics in 1939. That was a big step in his career. His comic book debut was as a text filler for Captain America Foiled The Traitor's Revenge. So Stan, even all the way back in 1939, he's only 18 years old. Yeah. 18 years old. He's starting to work on Captain America, and he was actually given the keys to the to the house when he was 19. Like the year after. From what I've read, there was a big kerfuffle between the creators and artists and stuff, and he winds up being editor-in-chief of I believe I'm not sure if it's Timely Comics.
I think
Timely Comics,
yeah. It's Timely.
I think it's still Timely then.
Amazing, 19. Like, when I was 19, I wasn't doing anything like that. So, really good stuff. Look, before we go onto a short break and get into the Loony Mail, I just wanted to posit to both of you, Rebecca and Chad, what is Stan Lee's greatest legacy? What has he left? I mean, I know it sounds kind of obvious, but there are so many facets, as we've just discussed. For you, what is the one legacy that is the most important that he's left behind? Rebecca, sorry.
That you don't have to be superhuman to be a hero.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, exactly. That's actually that's very good. I wasn't expecting that, Rebecca, but that was really exactly. I think his earthiness of
it makes it attainable to everyone. It means you might not be able to go out and fight aliens, because you don't have the Iron Man suit. Because let's take one of the ones who doesn't have superpowers. You don't have the Iron Man suit, but you can still do something to make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think exactly. That's exactly right. His peripheral characters just as much importance and is just as memorable as a lot of his big creations there as well. Chad, what would you say would be the one legacy for Stan Lee that he's left for all comic book fans and for the greater population?
Well, to be honest, I was just going to say that, he created a new line of gods, essentially. And it was kind of going to go back towards what Rebecca said. Yeah. That you can be heroic, but you don't have to have powers. And I was recently over at the Mopop Museum in Seattle, and I was going through the Marvel exhibit with my wife, and we dropped by all the old school clippings and whatnot on the topic of heroism and whatnot. It's Paperboy Bucky teaching everyone how to stack newspapers X amount of height.
But it's true. I mean, going back to what you said, it's like it's not just the point that you didn't have to be superhuman to be heroic, but it is he did have this huge part in creating a new mythology.
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
that's how we treat comics now, to a certain extent. It's
even
how a lot of people are get involved in Norse mythology these days is through Thor, and then reading more about it, rather than when I was growing up, we read the myths, which is fine.
Yeah.
But it's become this thing now where the characters are kind of, we don't worship them, but they're enough of an importance to us that we take moral lessons from them.
Yeah,
you know,
we're told stories of them, and you just say moral lessons, exactly. Yeah. Oh, look, I was about to take it not that big a scale, but that is totally an awesome legacy there, Chad. I was about to say, like, pop culture as well. Like, you know how we talk about, in pop culture, like the Westerns and all that. That was a big fad that came and went, and that was huge, right? And it, eventually died out. We're currently living through a massive pop culture, wave of comic book because of the movies. Comic books are still out there, but it's more so the movies and the higher profile stuff, which has brought comic books into the public eye more than ever before. And again, with Stan as the face of Marvel, pretty much. He's just become such an icon in himself. I also wanted to just say as well, just another little tidbit here, Chad, like you were mentioning, previously about Stan's achievements. The Comics Code authorities as well, back in the day, in the early 70s, Stan was asked to write a story on the bad effects of drugs, and having that in the Amazing Spider-Man comic. The Comics Code Authority were against it because they didn't want drugs portrayed. It was basically just against the code. Anyway, Stan Lee and John Goodman, who was one of the editors, I believe, they went ahead and published it anyway. The story got a lot of traction. Marvel was appreciated for spreading basically a very responsible message to society. And the Comic Code Authority then subsequently abolished the code, and they allowed negative depictions of drugs in the comics. So even then we can see Stan trailblazing a little there by pushing the boundaries of what can be done in comics. And him, and actually being a tool for social awareness, I think is really good. On top of, as you were saying, Chad, about the relevance of the X-Men and Spider-Man and all that sort of stuff. Really, really good stuff. For me, that would probably be the greatest legacy, I think, that Stan's left. He's just given us, I guess, so much that a lot of people remember through a large part of their lives, especially growing up as well, being nurtured almost by the characters, and for him to actually allow our imaginations and creativity to flourish. I mean, I don't know about you as well, but when I was little, I remember when I was 7 or 8 years old, I would start making superhero characters myself. I found it one of the most glorious things, at that age, just coming up with characters, drawing, and that's all testament to comics and in large part to Marvel and Stan. So, really great stuff. Okay, well, why don't we'll just take a quick short break, and we'll come back with, we have some Loony mail to, I guess, in tribute to Stan Lee as well. So we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Chris.
And this is Brian.
And we are the hosts of Inner Demons, the Ghost Rider podcast.
And you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and other podcast apps for all your Ghost Rider needs.
Right on.
Yes, welcome back, Loonies. Thanks for joining us. This is our tribute episode to Stan Lee, a great man. Rest in peace, Stan. 1922 to 2018. I am joined by Rebecca and Chad, and we have a bit of mail here that we really good to, I guess, read out. I mean, we've always been a very communal thing at ITK in the Facebook group. So it was really good to hear some really, really beautiful words from a lot of the Loonies. So, Rebecca, would you like to kick us off with the first one?
Yes. The first one is from Rick. He says, Stan Lee will forever be known as a creative genius that revolutionized the entire superhero medium. He made the world believe that superheroes could not only be relatable, but also have real-life problems. He'll always be a Marvel legend. He's our superhero. And he says, I'll be honouring him by rereading his phenomenal run on the Silver Surfer during my overseas trip. He's away at the moment, so...
Yes, off in China, I believe. I believe he's there now. Yeah. Thank you so much, Rick. I hope you are listening when this comes out. Thank you for those kind words. Yes, Stan, pretty much share the sentiments of all of us here. Chad, are you doing anything like Rick and rereading any runs in honour of Stan Lee?
I'm actually still trying to do some catch-up on the Infinity Warps event.
Okay.
Then I'll be going back and rereading. But before we move on, I'd like to say about Rick, as soon as, like, the evening for me that he went on and started, the evening of Stan's passing, Rick went on and started reading his Silver Surfer run. And he started posting a few things, and I can just say that I really needed that at that moment at work.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Norrin Rad standing up against Galactus, defying his will, and it felt like the right moment.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that's good. That's great. Rick's a man of timing. Well done, Rick. Thank you so much for those words. We also have another one from David Finn, one of the hosts from Signal of Doom, and he says about Stan, a game changer, a taste maker, a hungry creative genius, and the greatest salesman the medium has ever seen and probably will ever see. A true legend whose legacy will last as long as we have these characters and universes to believe in. We are the poorer for his loss, but far richer for what he brought us. Excelsior. Rest easy, Stan. Thank you so much, David. That was really good. Yeah, and totally. I mean, Stan's legacy, it's going to be like, I think about it sometimes. I don't know about both of you as well, but how long these characters have endured. And, I get a little solemn sometimes, and I think, long after I'm gone, these characters will be around because they are so popular. They speak to so many people. They are just timeless, aren't they?
Yeah,
Definitely.
They really are. It's such a monument.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, thank you so much to Stan and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and the likes of Bill Everett and John Romita for creating all this lovely stuff for us to enjoy. Chad, we have another one.
This one's from Khonshu, and it's there's a chance bad tech may cause me to miss the pod, so kind of want to say something now. But there's the first time I ever found out who Stan Lee was when he voiced the tutorial for PS1's Spider-Man game. Absolutely funny, brilliant, and you could just hear the love for Marvel still in his voice, like 40 years after he started that company.
Yeah, thank you, Khonshu. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And of course, PS1, the Spider-Man game, again, it just shows, and as I mentioned earlier, the hard times when comics were really at a low, Stan Lee was still there, kind of pushing the agenda, really trying to get things going, trying anything. And yeah, I think that's a really great trait, and I think his perseverance really bore fruit at the end, and it paid off, thankfully, for himself and for all of us and for Marvel in general. Rebecca?
Yes. Let me just go back to it. Jared Hoyler. He says, we lost a great man, but he gave us happiness and adventures we can never possibly imagine. He was truly an inspiration to all, and he'll be missed greatly. He'll forever be our hero.
Yeah.
Shall we do the next one as well? Yeah. Josh Johnson.
Yep.
He said he's glad you guys are doing this. The man literally changed the world of pop culture along with Kirby and Ditko. Let's not forget them. Who knows where most of us would be in our lives without their contributions to Marvel. But to Stan himself, he's an icon for many reasons. He was always outgoing and excited about comics, and even during the years where comics got no respect and was shunned and literally burned, he was still out there pushing them into the public. He was also one of the first to treat the readers as people, hosting the Comic View, talking to you directly on his soapbox and in the bullpen bulletins. He taught us moral lessons and how to be a good person. Perhaps the most important thing he showed us is that people can be flawed or different, and that's okay. He gave us the first family in comics, and they had real-world problems that we all have. He gave us the first teenage superhero who could handle the duties on his own, and that with great power comes great responsibility. He gave us a God that learns humility and what it's like to be human. He gave us a man who overcame his handicap to dish out justice in court with his fists. He showed us a group of people who were outcast and shunned by society because they were different. He showed us how someone who was a horrible person who benefited from the horrors of war turned their life around and tried to save lives and make the world a better place. He also taught us that a shield can be a badass projectile weapon. He's taught the world so many things and inspired so many others. The world is definitely at a loss of a great man. No matter what anyone says, he is the greatest superhero of all time.
Yes, thank you, Josh. Really, really nice, really beautiful words there about Stan. What also comes to mind for me is how forthcoming Stan Lee was, with giving his autograph, and also having photos taken with him. Look, it might piss off some fans who were hoping to make some money from it, but I think it's just great, and again showing how Stan would just do anything for the fans, and anyone could actually approach him or try to get his autograph. So really really good stuff. We have another one here from Noel Tate, thank you, Noel, who is the singer and guitarist from the Music Deleter, which features on our show. And Noel has a very cool reflection here on Stan. He says, I love comic books. I have since I was around 7 years old. The first comics I read I picked up at a pharmacy a few blocks away from my childhood home. They only carried Marvel comics. The distributor probably had a contract or something. The first one that drew my attention was Spider-Man, and soon after the Hulk and X-Men. All of Stan's comic book creations were freaks. At a time when our comic book heroes were invincible aliens or billionaire adventurers, his heroes were damaged, poor, down on their luck, and societal outcasts. In other words, relatable to us, the freaks. I felt alone as a kid. I still do a lot. I had my mum and dad and little brother, of course, but I always felt alone, different. I'm sure a lot of us did. When I was little, I would climb to the rooftop of the little tin shed my dad put together in our backyard and lie on my back at night and stare at the stars and lose myself in my imagination. I'd dream of aliens or climbing walls or being a ninja, an imagination Stan Lee helped nurture through his creations. His characters, and all the ones inspired by Stan's house of ideas, felt like they had a part of me in them. The Hulk's loneliness and rage, Spider-Man's guilt, creativity and adherence to responsibility, Silver Surfer's isolation, the X-Men mutants, weirdness. All freaks like me, like how I felt, just supernatural ones. I could hear my own thoughts in their thought bubbles. I could see my own potential and flaws in their deeds. I could feel helplessness and hope in those pages, and I could relate. Relate to such strange tales of mysticism and science gone amok. They made me feel less alone, and to know that at least other people could imagine the same feelings I had and make little drawings and words with the same emotions I had. Stan put himself in his comics, sometimes literally, and always at least let us know who created these books. Marvel, understand, gave us insight into the bullpen that made us stories and gave us an understanding into and championed the creative soul. I'll miss Stanley Martin Lieber, but his ideas will always live on, and my gratitude will survive in the thousands of stories he and King Kirby and Shy Steve Ditko gave me, and us all so long ago, and continue to inspire into the future. Enough said. True believer. Thank you so much, Noel. That is really touching, and I think sums up and probably describes how a lot of us felt as well. So, yeah, really, really good stuff, and really, it pretty much sums up Stan's impact, and his characters. Chad, would you like to maybe read the last three? They're kind of short.
Sure. This first one, I'm probably gonna butcher this name.
Good luck here.
Is it Zhao?
Yeah, I don't know. Yanker?
Hey. Sorry again, but Stanley was and still is a legend. The man himself taught us many lessons no other person could. Taught us how to imagine, how to innovate. He co-created many characters that reshaped comics, reshaped media in general, and shaped ourselves. Godspeed, Stan. You'll live through your characters.
Yes.
And the next one's from Dustin Cold Case Kurtz.
Yeah.
I think the thing that has been most striking to me since his passing has been the stories being shared by various comic professionals about how Stan Lee inspired them on a personal level. He had such an impact on mentoring so many writers and artists, even in the smallest way, that his touch on comic books is going to be felt for many, many years after he's gone. It's hard to overstate the impact he had on all of our lives. I hope you realize that. I think he did. The world is a little less magical without him in it. Excelsior, Stan. You will be missed.
Yes. And, yep.
This last one's from Blake Buxton, and his states started reading in 1975, collecting in 1977. I never got to meet him, but feels like I knew him. What a man.
Yeah, thank you, Blake. I think, again, that sentiment we carry with us as well. Like, Stan Lee has been really in a lot of our lives for so long. I mean, you know, I cast back to when I was little, and, you know, I've got a small family now, and, you know, his characters have made an impact since then as well. And exactly as you say, Blake, never got to meet him, but, you know, just felt kind of like you knew him, or he was a part of you, because he was part of growing up. Certainly for me, anyway. And Dustin, really, really good point that you bring about Stan's impact on mentoring others. Like, again, we mentioned, I think earlier, how kind Stan was, and how willing he was to, like, that Death's Head guy, Rebecca, of giving giving him a go. There's a little thing here as well, a bit later on, that Khonshu actually posted as well, which is it was really touching. But yeah, about his relationship with others, and I'm glad that you called it out, Dustin, because it sounded like he was a really encouraging, helped others, you know, from his position, and that's got to be a good thing. And finally, Zhao, thank you so much as well. Reshape comics for sure, reshape media in general. I mean, you've only got to look at 2008 onwards, when Marvel Studios has absolutely skyrocketed. We're talking, movies now which show diversity, like in Black Panther, absolutely killing it at the box office. It's just phenomenal what has sprouted from these ideas from Stan Lee, and from his humble beginnings, being a text filler, for Timely Comics. He's really done a lot in that long career that he's had. Also, actually, incidentally, reminded me again, another little note, in 2006 as well, I think they marked basically the retirement of Stan Lee, 65 years in the industry, and Marvel released a whole lot of comics with I think with Stan Lee on the cover or in the comics themselves. So I think a very fitting way to pay tribute to Stan. And Rebecca, you actually put up something recently as well.
Pulling it up as well, that apparently a bunch of comics coming out in December and January are going to have a Stan Lee tribute on their covers. And it's a massive list. Just trying to think which the ones that we're most likely to... Marvel Knights is going to have one. Defenders, the Best Defense, going to have one. Captain America, Iron Man, Spider-Man. Both Spider-Mans. So Thor. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of them, but they're not going to be like massive pictures of Stan Lee. Apparently, they're going to be part of the trade dress, which is the bit where it says Marvel Comics. I think they've shown kind of an example of an old one. It sort of said Marvel and then like little Stan Lee signature. So we don't actually know what it's going to happen, because obviously it's happened pretty quickly. I assume that we'll get a proper tribute to him maybe in February or March. I don't know how long it takes for them to... I'm guessing February, actually, where they do those little tributes at the back. They did one for Marie Severin.
Oh, yes.
They did one for Ditko. With some of his most famous panels. So I assume we'll get something. We might even get a memorial comic, but that's going to take a little while to put together. So in the meantime, because and that's the other thing we should say is one of the first tributes that I saw was from DC. And Image also, all the comic companies came out and did it. Comic creators across the industry have been doing it. Film stars from across the industry who've never been in Marvel films have been tributing. So I mean, this was a real sort of cross. It's a cultural kind of thing. It's like he was culture for a lot. He was the face of comic book culture for people who will never pick up an Image comic book.
Yes. Yeah.
They will still see an Image comic book and somehow relate it to Stan Lee. Like we don't, because we're so involved in it. We may know there's a reason, what led to what, but people outside see comics and think Stan Lee.
Yeah. And so I mean those covers, which will run, as you mentioned, Rebecca. Look, I'll be pretty keen to get, not from any monetary gain or whatever, but I think it'd be nice to pick it up in tribute as well to Stan. As you said, just such a far-reaching influence on the greater culture, of today. It's just really phenomenal. So, I think we'll just end on this notes and feedback here. Chad, would you like to read out? Khonshu actually posted something up, and again, this is a nice little snippet as to, the type of man that Stan was. It's proof here in the letter, dated back 1961, I think, or 64. Have you got that with you there, Chad?
Is that the Simon Furman?
No.
No.
I just added that. I don't see the thing from Connor either.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh.
You may have to do that.
Okay, sorry. There was an image that Connor posted up on Facebook, Khonshu, really touching. And anyway, it just says, I was 12, I was naive, I mailed 3/4 to Marvel Comics with a request for 3 annuals. The local drugstore didn't carry 25-cent annuals, only 12-cent regular comic books. Marvel returned my quarters and said I should send a check or money order after July. I was crushed and wrote Stan Lee that I was afraid Marvel would run out of annuals if I waited to order after July, and Stan Lee came through. The 1964 Marvel annuals, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and Marvel Tales were mine. And there's a scan of the letter that Stan Lee sent this gentleman. His name is Mark. On July 2nd, 1964, it was typed, sent back to Mark. Dear Mark, someone around here is going to be fed to the manta rays for what you, our true fan, have been forced to endure. My grandfather used to tell me stories of how subscription departments could tangle themselves up, but I never really believed them until now. If a fan is interested enough in our comics to send in his money, he's entitled to get them. Not in a month, not after July 30th, pronto. Any reader who has taken as much bureaucratic tomfoolery as you have and remained calm and polite about it deserves some kind of reward. So we're sending you, free of charge, the 3 annuals you originally requested. We hope you enjoy them, and we pledge this idiocy will not continue. Sincerely, Stan Lee, editor. I think that's just fantastic what he's done. So yeah, a little snippet as to the sort of person I guess Stan was and how he interacted with fans, and that just carried on throughout his whole life and up until recently as well, when he'd visit comic book conventions. He would stand up in front of crowds promoting Marvel, as he always does. Fantastic stuff, Stan. So I think that's probably a fitting way to end on Stan Lee and our tribute to Stan. Loonies, sorry, no Moon Knight-related material at all on this episode, but we just thought it would be good to just reflect a bit on the passing of Stan Lee, because it's such a massive event in the comic book world. Chad, any last final thoughts or reflections on Stan?
To be completely honest, I've done most of my thinking while at work. I just kind of subjugated it to parts of my brain to wait until I have a good point, moment,
Yeah, for sure. And Rebecca, anything else you'd like to mention?
A bit like Chad, it's still not entirely sunk in for me. I have to say, reading out those tributes almost brought me to tears, which shows that I've still got some processing to do. Considering I'm usually quite, life carries on. But I did go see Venom yesterday, and
I saw that.
Totally forgot it ended on a Stan Lee cameo. Sorry for that tiny spoiler for anyone, but that's really tiny, and it's been out a while now. And it was a bit of an unexpected gut punch again, and it's just, I think I've still got some processing to do, and world events are currently just put it to one side.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm still really enjoying everyone else's stories and everyone else processing their feelings. And, eventually I'm sure it'll hit me properly.
And we do have, I think CBR reported as well, we do have a few cameos to come for Stan, which I can only imagine will be even harder to process, seeing that. We'd like to obviously celebrate as well just the great life of Stan Lee as well. We don't want to dwell too much on the bad things, on the sad things, but of course there is a process, as you say, Rebecca, that we have to go through. He was a great man. He gave a lot to everyone, and he will be truly missed. So thank you so much, Stan Lee, for everything. And I'll definitely be reading comics until I'm well past my prime. So thank you, Rebecca, for coming on and sharing your thoughts with us. thank you, Chad, as well. Thank you. I know it's very late over there, and you're in your den, so I'm not sure how claustrophobic you may feel in there and in the dead of night. But thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been fun. Yeah, just talking about it, and Fear Not Loonies will be back with our regular show next week. So next phase will be a Waning Crescent. So we missed the trade arc review. We were going to do the Scarlet, Stained Glass Scarlet Redemption by J.M. DeMatteis, and I do apologise. I totally butchered his name last episode. J.M. DeMatteis, fantastic writer, obviously a legend in his own right, doing the Kraven's Last Hunt and obviously this Moon Knight arc. We will miss that, sadly, but we have the Waning Crescent next phase, which deems it a classic run, and again, another little boo-boo, so we'll be returning to it. We will be looking at the very first issue of Moon Knight Volume 1, released 1980. This was Doug Menchen's seminal run, which kind of formed how we see Moon Knight a lot today. So that should be a lot of fun to do. That will be next week. So as usual, you can find us on email, itkmoonnight@gmail.com. We have a website, intothenightpodcast.wordpress.com. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/itkmoonnight, and we have a fantastic Facebook group. Please come say hello. Please join. We won't bite. It's at facebook.com/groups/itkmoonnight. We're on Twitter at itkmoonnight, as well as Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube. Just search for Into the Night with a K, a Moon Knight podcast. Finally, we are on all good podcast catches, just whatever takes your fancy in listening to podcasts. We should be there. And I must mention as well, with iTunes ratings, if you do like what you hear, please send us a review. It would be great if we can get a 5-star one. It just helps us get out there and be exposed to a lot more potential loonies who might be looking for Moon Knight, and we still get loony members coming in on a daily basis, so there are plenty out there. We just hope that they can see our beacon. But thank you so much, loonies, for listening to this very special episode. Once again, rest in peace, Stan Lee. Thank you again so much for everything that you've done for comic book fans and for pop culture in general. You will be sorely missed. May Khonshu watch over the denizens of the night. Catch you later.
Moon Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.